Welcome, everyone. So we are going to read today of the passing of Moses. And as I said, we'll look at the sin that's referenced both with the passing of Moses and the passing of Aharon. So open to page 842, 842, which is in the book of Bimidbar, Numbers, chapter 20, beginning with verse 7. Again, I don't want to spend much time on this because what we really want to focus on today is the passing of Moses at the end of the Torah. So this is just a little bit of a backdrop to that. At the bottom of page 842 or 843 if you're looking in the English, chapter 20, verse 7. Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, God speaks to Moses saying, Kach et hamateh, take that staff, your staff, and v'hakhel et ha'edah, gather the people, ata ve'aharon achicha, you and Aaron your brother, v'dibartem el hasela le'eineihem v'natan memav, speak to the rock in front of the people, and it will give its water. V'hotzeita lahem mayim min hasela, you'll take water from the rock, v'hishkita et ha'edah ve'et be'iram, you'll water the nation and their cattle. And sure enough, verse 9, Vayikach Moshe, I'm now at the top of the next page, top of page 844, Moshe takes et hamateh, the staff from before God, just as God had commanded him, ka'asher tzivahu, verse 10. Vayakhilu Moshe ve'Aharon, Moses and Aaron, gathered the people, et hakahal, el pnei hasela, in front of this rock, Vayomer lahem, and he said to them, maybe it was Aaron, because he's always the one speaking out loud, said to the people, or maybe it was Moses. It just says Vayomer, and he said, Shim'u na hamorim, hamin hazela hazen notzi lachem mayim. Listen, you rebels, we are going to bring forth, or aren't we going to bring forth water from this rock? We, Aaron and Moshe. And then, and by the way, it seems likely that maybe Aharon spoke that, and now Moshe raises the staff. Vayare Moshe et yado, vayach et hasela, Moshe raises his hand, hits the rock, b'matehu, with his stick, pa'amayim, twice. There's one interpretation that the sin was that they hit it twice. Like what, you didn't believe that hitting the rock once was enough for God to make a miracle? So there are all kinds of textual questions that arise, but he hit it twice. Vayitzu mayim rabim vaytesh ha'edah uve'iram. Lots of water came out. The people and their animals drank. And here is now God now responding to Moshe and Aharon, or rebuking Moshe and Aharon. And this language is the language that's going to come back when we read about now the death of Moshe. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe ve'el Aharon. God says to both Moshe and Aharon, Ya'an lo ha'emantem bi, because you did not have faith in me or believe in me, lehakdisheni, to sanctify me, le'enei b'nei Yisrael, in front of the people. You didn't do a Kiddush Hashem. You didn't sanctify the name of God in front of the people. For whatever reason, and that's where we could quibble about what exactly did they do that was wrong. Was it the hitting instead of the speaking? Was it the hitting twice? Was it the way that they said, we are going to get water from this rock, not God is going to get water from this rock? So whatever it was a failure of their spiritual leadership. And lachen, therefore, lo taviu et hakahal hazeh el haaretz asher natati lahem. Therefore, you will not bring this nation into the land that I am giving to them. Hema me miriva, these are the waters of fighting, the waters of strife. Asher ravu b'nei Yisrael et Hashem vayikadesh bam. This is the place of water fighting, water fight. That God was sanctified, or maybe should have been sanctified better in the context of this miracle. So that's the event that precipitated God to say, you're not getting into the land. And when we read about the death of Aharon last week, it was referred to. And I remember someone asked about it, and I didn't want to shuffle through and try to find it in that moment. So I found it, and now it's going to be referred to again with the death of Moshe this week. Yeah, Naomi. Where geographically? So it's between Egypt and the land of Israel. These lots of different chumashim offer maps that estimate exactly where. So I'm not sure if you're asking a geographic. They then after that they went up and around. Yeah. It's a good question. How far up? I don't know. We could pull out those maps. Yeah. I don't know.
Is it allowed to say that God seems to get insulted very easily?
So that's a great question. God seems to have decided this quite quickly. I don't know if that's exactly how you're saying it, but I'm going to offer the suggestion that this really wasn't a one-time problem.
Okay.
This maybe was the straw that broke the back of the rebellious camel. Or that, right, their leadership again and again, when the people are complaining and the people are in need of their sanctifying God's name, you see Moshe and Aaron falling on their faces. What do we say to these people? When they're complaining about the land, when they're complaining about the water, when they're complaining about food, they get angry, and they are not perhaps the leaders that will take them into battle in the land, in the new generation.
Completely believe in Hashem?
So I don't think that we're really challenging the faith of Moses and Aaron. Maybe Moses and Aaron are wondering about the faith of the people. Is that what they're exhausted. They're fed up. I always think also about everything that they did to get them out of Egypt. And now they're kvetching. Doesn't that count for something? So they got them from point A to point B, but they're not going to be the ones to bring them from point B to point C. C being the land. I don't know how that just happened. Yes, Rhoda.
Why aren't the Jews punished rather than the leaders?
So the nation themselves are punished not with this sin, but with the sin of the spies. After the spies come back, 10 out of 12 give a negative report, and the people moan and wail and cry, bring us back to Egypt, we don't want to be here, you brought us to the wilderness, we can't even, again and again. But after the sin of the spies, God says, you're going to stay here for 40 years and only your children will go in. So that's when the nation are punished, which was actually just in the parsha before this. So you might have thought after that the people would die out and that Moses and Aaron would bring the people in, the next generation. But now the leadership itself is going to transition. Okay, we've got to get to Moshe. So let's fast forward now to the book of Devarim, chapter 32, which will be on page 1110, 1110. The end of chapter 32, verse 48. Page 1110, 1110. Moshe's been saying goodbye for a really long time. He's had a lot to say. He reviewed some of the mitzvot. He reviewed some of the stories. And now God says on the bottom, the middle of page 1110, verse 48, Memchet, Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe be'etzem hayom hazeh. On that very day, God said to Moses, Alei el har ha'avarim hazeh har nevo. Go up to this mountain of passage, har ha'avarim. Here it just says Mount Abarim, but it could also be la'avor, passing over. So this is a mountain that's just, I think, about passing over into Israel, but also he's passing, you could say. It's not a phrase that we would use for death in the Bible, but it's Har HaAvarim, and then the other name of it is Har Nevo. And then it gives the location. It's in Eretz Moav, in the Moabite territory, which is just across from Yericho, Asher al Pnei Yericho. So that could be a foreshadowing of what? When are we going to get to see Jericho? The very first place they're going to cross over into. Not with Moses, but with Joshua. will be Yericho. So Moshe gets to have a glimpse of Yericho. I wonder as we read this if you'll read this as depressing, frustrating for Moshe, or inspiring, and at least he gets to see it at the end, even if he doesn't get to go in. Okay. So they're not yet in Canaan. He's looking over into Canaan, into Jericho. Ure'et eretz Canaan. Look at the land of Canaan. Asher ani noten livnei Yisrael la'achuzah. I'm going to give that land as an inheritance to the people of Israel. Umut bahar, but you will die on this mountain. Asher ata oleh shama, that you're about to go up to. Vehe asef el amecha, be gathered into your people. Ka'asher meit, here's the phrase. Ka'asher meit Aharon achicha behor hahar vayasef el amav. Yes, Moshe, you will have a peaceful death, just as you got to see your brother Aharon had a peaceful passing. And you're going to die on this mountain. And here's the reference now to the sin, verse 51. Al asher me'altem bi betoch b'nei Yisrael, b'mei merivat kadesh midbar tzin. You, me'altem, you trespassed against me, it says. You cheated against me. There's a word that I can't find right now that I'm looking for a better English word. But you sinned against me amidst the people of Israel. This was a public sin at Mei Merivah, which we just read about. Al asher lo kidashtem oti betoch b'nei Yisrael. The sin is you didn't sanctify me among the nation, which is your job as a spiritual leader, is to bring people closer to God. Ki mineged tir'eh ha'aretz, from across, from opposite, you will see the land. V'shama lo tavo, but there you will not enter. El ha'aretz asher ani noten livnei Yisrael, this land that I'm about to give to the people of Israel. So that's the command. He hasn't done it yet. Moshe hasn't gone up the mountain yet. God sets the stage. Yeah.
Question. Do you see it as a kindness or as a dig that God let Moshe see the land?
Oh, that's the question that I posed to us as a group. Do you see this as a kindness, as a relief? I didn't say kindness, but do you see this as a fulfilling moment for Moshe, that at least he gets to see it?
What the intention is, but I'm curious.
Oh, what was God's intention?
Yes.
Oh,
That's what I mean.
good question. I guess I asked, how do you think Moses received it?
No, but
Did he
would
receive
say
it
more-
well,
I
or
would
did
say
he
more
was he
on-
frustrated?
I mean, I like to think of God as, benevolent, in which case he's saying, look, I can't let you cross over because you contravene me.
Right.
But I'll let you see it.
So was
So
God?
when you close
You're
your eyes,
suggesting
you'll have a nice image when you
we might think that this was God doing one more dig at Moshe. You're not going to go in there, but we prefer to think that this is a generous moment, that he even gets to die in the spot that he's looking at the future. I mean, think about how fulfilling that might be for someone who knows that they can't make it.
It's like seeing your grandchildren.
But it's bringing the grandchildren or the great-grandchildren, and it is like Aharon got to have a glimpse of the future. And Moshe knows that his dream will be fulfilled, even if it's not in his lifetime.
But I was going to say, I'm not sure, but wasn't there a promise that he would lead the children to?
So that's important. There was a promise that the people of Israel would get the land, but there wasn't a promise that it had to be Moshe to lead them. Not necessarily. The promise was to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, to the patriarchs. The promise is that you'll have a nation, and the nation will have a land, and it will be this land, the land of Canaan. It's important to notice that it didn't have to be Moshe. It goes along with something we mentioned last week, that we don't want to deify these prophets. Moshe got them out, but Moshe didn't get them in. So he had to hand it on to the next generation. Someone else had a hand there? No? Oh, I thought
I just want
yeah.
that leaders are held to higher standards.
Leaders are held to higher standards.
I mean, that's what it appears to be in these, that
They had a job
Moses
to
did
do.
so many good things for this one thing of hitting the rock, he doesn't get to go in.
So here's what I have to tell you. There was a midrash, I couldn't find it yet in English, but there's a midrash that is clearly troubled by the severity of this punishment as compared to this, what seems to be a small sin. And it's in Devarim Rabbah, where it says that Moshe sort of took his powers of persuasion for granted and wasn't so troubled that God said, you can't go in, because he was going to pray and get forgiven. Or he said, I'm so sinless, I'm so innocent. From my childhood, I never sinned. So I'm going to pray for myself, and God will accept my prayer. And when Kevan Shera'ah HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm reading from this midrash in Devarim Rabbah, when God saw that Shekal Hadavar, it was a light matter in the eyes of Moses, and he wasn't even praying, Eino Omed B'Tfilah, he didn't jump up right away and pray and say, no, let me into the land. Immediately, Kafatz alav v'nishba b'shmo hagadol. Immediately, God jumped at it and promised, in God's name, promised that he wouldn't go into the land of Israel. It was hubris. It was a leader being overconfident, which is similar to that moment of hitting the rock. I've got you guys. I'll bring you some water. Remember, I got you bread from the sky. Remember, I split that sea. So Moses, maybe, according to this midrash, is getting a little too high and mighty, a little too overconfident, and that's it. It's over. There's another, that midrash continues. I'll read to it from it a little bit later, where then there's a conversation about who's going to take Moses' soul. No one wants to do it. None of the angels want to go do the deed. So we'll get there. Okay. So the instructions come. Is it about this part? Let's hold off. Let's see a little bit more text. Okay, yes.
It just, I'm trying to stay focused on the text and leave the midrash aside. And it just seems to me that what we've been reading all along has been preparation for the second generation. We see it concretely with Eleazar, and it's going to come with Moses too.
Yes.
And
What we're seeing, you're saying in every passing that we've read about, there's a focus on who's coming next.
generation.
Well, and isn't that what the Torah is about,
And
right?
So
Moving the covenant forward.
had to die out. It was the next generation that was going to cross into Canaan. And so the leadership had to be the next generation as well. It just made no sense.
You're saying it makes sense that if there's a new generation of people, there's going to be a new generation of leaders.
All the debts
Right.
have been
Are you saying that because that means you're not so troubled by the fact that Moshe is not taking them into the land? This is what's happening all along.
It makes
Yeah,
sense
yeah.
given the text, given where the text is taking us.
Well, and we've also,
He is also Dor HaMidbar. In the end, he is Dor HaMidbar.
he is the generation of the wilderness, is what you're saying. We've also had already a transfer of leadership to Yehoshua. So we've known all along. Yeah. Okay, so let's get to the narrative itself. So the instructions came from God. What happens next, if you flip to the next page, Vizot HaBracha, this is the beginning of chapter 33, Vizot HaBracha, the beginning of the final parsha of the Torah. These are the blessings that Moses blesses on the last day of his life. And each of the tribes have a blessing. And who does this echo? Who else blessed?
Jacob.
Yeah, Jacob blessed each of his sons. But it wasn't a tribe back then. It was an individual. And now Moshe is blessing a nation. So look how we've jumped from being a family to being a nation of 12 tribes. Okay, this is something I also had to memorize in elementary school. I really admire that. I mean, it doesn't work for every kid, but if it works for you, it really works. I liked that. Okay, turn to page 1120. 1120. So the reason we read the instructions was because now we see the carrying out, the implementation of God's instruction. Vaya'al Moshe me'arvot Moav el Har Nevo. Moses ascended from the plains of Moab to the mountain of Har Nevo. Rosh HaPisga asher al pnei Yericho. The edge of the top, the cliff that faced Jericho. And here's the moment where he gets to behold the entire country. I mean, it must have been a clear day. Vayar'ehu Hashem, God showed to him. Or maybe it was a miraculous God showed. Could he really see from there all the way up north? Et kol haaretz, et hagilad, ad Dan, et Naphtali, Eretz Ephraim, and Menashe. So all these different regions of the land. Ad hayam ha'acharon, across to the sea. Which other sea? That would be the Mediterranean. So if you could imagine, he's standing on the other side of the Jordan and could see all the way across the land to the Mediterranean, to the Western Sea. Et HaNegev, et HaKikar, Bik'at Yericho, Eretz Marim. Okay, so he's seeing the land in its entirety. Vayomer Hashem Elav. Now this is verse 4 on the top of the next page, page 1122. It's a moment. He's not just saying, get a glimpse, and now you're going. It's a moment where God reiterates the promise. Zot ha'aretz asher nishbati le'Avraham, le'Yitzchak, u'le'Yaakov. This is the land that you've been hearing about. Remember, where was Moses born? He was born in Egypt, obviously. So he's never been here. 1 minute. This is the land that I promised to your patriarchs, saying, Lezar acha etnana. I said, I will give this to your offspring. Her'iticha be'einecha v'shama lo ta'avor. This is where it does sound a little bit like a dig. I'm showing it to you with your eyes, but you will never get there. Oy.
Yeah.
What does Moshe answer? Well, it's a trick question. What does Moses answer? So we don't have any final words. What were his final words? We did have them. They were the words of blessings. Those were his final words.
Those are good fun.
And then he goes up silently, or at least there's no recording of.
Yeah.
He hears it. You're saying it's a moment of acceptance of God's decree. Yes, Naomi.
No, it said he buried him in his depression.
Oh, well,
No, it's
in his depression means something else there, yes. Okay, what was your comment?
Because it says here, to see the entire land, all of Naphtali and the land of Ephraim and Manasseh.
Those are the regions. Thank you for pointing that out. The names of tribes here have to do with the regions of the land as they were apportioned to the tribes. So Dan is in the north, and
At that time. I mean, they're not there yet.
they're not there yet. So we're referring to the areas that will be apportioned to those. Yeah. I mean, he hasn't been to Jericho either yet. Jericho was an old city, but yeah, that's how we can refer to those regions. I think that's what it is. That's a good point. Yeah.
I thought 2 of the tribes stayed.
Oh, yes. So 2.5 of the tribes, Reuven, Gad, and half of Menashe, stayed on the east side of the Jordan. We already had that conversation in the book of Bimidbar. So he knows that. So these mention the other regions where the other tribes. It does mention Menashe because half of Menashe still went in Right. Excellent. Okay. So verse 5, here's the moment. Vayamat Sham Moshe. And Moses died there. Moses who? Eved Hashem, the servant of God. That's how he's referred to. Be'eretz Moav al pi Hashem. We have to focus on a few phrases here. In the land of Moab, by the mouth of God. Do you remember when we talked about Miriam and the Midrash noticed that the text for Miriam did not say al pi Hashem, by the mouth of God? And there was this Midrashic tradition that the mouth of God is that Moses died with the kiss of God, and Aaron died with the kiss of God. And then I even saw, I didn't print it out, but a reference in the Midrash to other greats who died by the mouth of God, and not Miriam, because it would be unseemly or immodest to talk about the mouth of Miriam and the mouth of God, which we sort of didn't sit well with because it implies that God is male, but Miriam was the only female mentioned in that context, so I think it's more about that and about a concern for not focusing on the woman. I don't know. I'm not going to try and make it better. But the assertion that Miriam was just as holy and as just a high level as Moshe and Aharon is what I'm going to stick with.
Yeah.
Okay, so Moses dies al pi Hashem. And Rashi who is the one who quotes, says, by the divine kiss. But the big question when it comes to the death of Moses is the following. If it starts by saying, Vayamat Sham Moshe, and Moses died, and if God gave the Torah to Moses, and Moses wrote all of it down, then how can the Torah then say, and Moses died? The big question, the Talmud asks this, who wrote the last 8 verses of the Torah? If it says, and Moses died.
But isn't it said also that God showed Moshe the whole land, but not only physically, he showed him the history, the future history.
Okay.
So as a matter of fact, Moses was how I say in English, the keep holder of the future of us.
So Moses received in prophecy everything that happened in the future, and it could include this. So that's one answer. And I'll just read it to you in the words of the Midrash. It's in the Midrash Sifrei Devarim, and it also is quoted in the Talmud. Remember, Midrash and Talmud are about similar eras. The Holy One, blessed be He, dictated this, and Moses wrote it in tears. Moses wrote it bidema, in tears. So you can imagine Moses, the last words of the Torah, he's hearing about literally what will be when he is gone. And he's getting to hear almost like his own eulogy, because the rest of the Torah now is going to talk about mourning Moshe and how great Moshe was. So maybe that also was a very comforting experience for him. That's possibility number one. Moshe did write it. We insist Moshe wrote it, every word of the Torah, so the only way this could have been was through prophecy. Option number two, possibility number two, Joshua wrote it. Joshua wrote the last 8 verses that Moses wrote until here, and from here onward, Joshua wrote. He finished the unfinished business of his master, his predecessor. Another more mystical kind of interpretation that I also saw quoted, this is the last one, that God gave Moses all of these letters, but they were not broken up into words, or they were not given in a sensical manner. So it was up to Joshua to unscramble it, or to make sense of it. I'm not sure if it was scrambled, or I can't remember if it was just without spaces, but that everything, what's in tension here? Well, the tension is that we want to believe that everything was given to Moses by God. So we have to reconcile ourselves to the final verses of the Torah. So either Moshe wrote it, or Moshe kind of wrote it in a cryptic way, or we just let go of this for the last 8 verses and we say Joshua wrote it. Any votes on what you feel is most compelling answer. Yeah.
It could have been that he wrote it and then was caused to forget it. I mean, his own, that part of it. I mean,
Maybe if he wrote it and was caused to forget it, although I don't know that we're so concerned. Like let Moses.
just so he wouldn't be walking around knowing his own thing. Knowing,
Oh, you're concerned for his well-being, walking around knowing.
his psychological.
What else? Any other?
No, that would mean that as a young man, he would know that he was never.
Oh, it didn't have to happen. That's a good point. It did. We don't have to assert that he got every word at Sinai. Even in the discussions, he's writing it throughout the 40 years. He's giving it and teaching it throughout the 40 years. So you could say that these last few verses God gave to him right before his death. He finished it, tied it up, gave it to the nation, which we do see referred to also in the book of Devarim, Moses giving the scroll to the people. And that would be more palatable than having him learn about it 40 years before. For his.
Someone write their memoirs at the end of their life.
Yeah, it's like memoirs, sure. Any other reactions to these theories? I'm just curious if people have strong feelings.
I think you'd know, if he knew everything ahead of time, that if he struck the rock, this was going to be a bad omen for him. If he's
So
privy to knowing
prophetic,
things ahead
yeah.
of
I think
time.
Moses still makes mistakes, even if he knows.
Well, the
Yeah.
mistake is he knew better and
Yeah.
still did it.
So just in the interest of, I know some people talk more freely than others. Let's do a little vote. Okay, there were three interpretations. Which do you feel you connect with the most? Option 1 was that Moshe wrote it in tears. Option 2 is that Moshe wrote it cryptically. Option 3 is that Joshua wrote it. How many people feel like number 1 feels the most compelling? That Moshe wrote it and he wrote it in tears. How many people, okay, so that was only 3. How many people feel compelled by that sort of mysterious way that Moshe wrote it cryptically? 1, 2? Okay, that means there's going to be a majority on number 3, that Joshua wrote the last 8 verses. Okay, it's interesting. Some of you abstained. It's okay. It's not like, they're all different interpretations. My point here is when we're studying text and commentary, there can be several stages. The first stage is always read the text on its own and encounter the text the way my teacher Menachem Leibtag always used to tell us. Rashi never learned Chumash with Rashi, right? He never learned the text with Rashi commentary. So just learn the text the way all of these scholars have learned the text. Then the questions jump out from the text. So that's stage 2 is then see what others have said throughout the centuries. And then stage 3 is what do I connect with most? Or is there another idea that hasn't been considered or that I haven't? I love the one that he's writing it in tears. I find that so touching. I'm not asking what's more believable, but that's where my heart is. That's a good question. That Moshe as a leader sees what's going to be, and it's comforting but sad. It's bittersweet. And that's what a leader has to do sometimes, is accept the limitations of his own leadership. So, but I also, I'm always going to go to the most poignant option. Okay, let's move on. So no more comments for now, except one comment. Okay, last comment here.
It says he buried him and did.
Okay, wait, we didn't get there. Let's read it now. Okay, He buried him. Your question is who buried who? Is that your question?
No.
Oh.
So, but it gives it a specific location.
Aha.
And then it says.
It gives a location, but it says we don't know where that location is. All right, let's read it. Verse 6. Vaikbor oto bagai. So what I focused on is what the commentary has noticed too. Who buried him? Who could be the only possible answer? God. Oh, that's true. But Joshua didn't go up with him. So it says, so yeah, that's important. Let's read it from the previous sentence. And Moses, the servant of God, died there by the mouth of God, and he buried him. Vayikbor. Vayikbor, and he buried him. So there's no and in the translation, but it's there. Let's just read the whole phrase. Vayikbor oto bagai, in that depression, in that indentation. Be'eretz Moav mul Beit Peor, okay, in this location. It doesn't say specifically where that mountain is, and I don't know if they've found it. Oh, that was my other homework. I was supposed to look that up. I think someone thinks they know where it is in Jordan. But the Torah is insisting, V'lo yada ish et kevurato ad hayom hazeh. Nobody knows his burial place. We are not going to have a shrine to Moses or a shrine to Aharon. Nobody knows this burial place until this day. Moshe, now we're going to have the summation, okay? Sorry, Marilyn, you wanted to say something about that?
I'm even talking to myself with the answer. When the text refers to God, and then the next sentence is and he, is God in Hebrew gender defined? Everything's been gender defined. Yes, everybody is.
Hebrew is a gendered language, so you're asking when it says vayikbor, the verb is and he buried him. It is male, and the verbs that refer to God in the Torah are always male. The Kabbalah love talking about the feminine aspects of God, the Shekhinah. So we don't really believe that God is male, but we have grammatical limitations of the language.
We don't have a neuter declension.
Right, there's no gender-neutral verb form to use. So in English, we can simply refrain from using a pronoun. I try not to say he or she. I try to just say God. And God said to God's self, as awkward as that sounds, is preferable to me. But Hebrew doesn't have that option. As French doesn't have that option, right? Right, and many gendered languages. There was a class I once heard, this was at the Hartman Institute, and it's killing me that I can't remember the teacher who taught it, but her research is in the way that different nouns in the Hebrew language are gendered differently. And what does it mean that a shulchan is a male noun and I'm blanking. And shamayim, heavens, is plural. And derech is a path is female. Like, what do all of these mean? Or what do they, not really why, but what do they do to our psyche when we're referring to certain objects as feminine or masculine? It's fascinating. And maybe Rachel Korazim talked about that once. Okay, but let's get to this, the end of the Torah. We got to get to the end of the Torah. Verse 7. Nobody knows where Moses died. Verse 7. Umoshe ben me'ah ve'esrim shana b'moto. He was 120 years old on the day of his death. Lo chahata eino v'lo nas lecho. His eye had not dimmed. His vigor had not diminished. He still had it till the age of 120. Bis 120, as we wish people. In good health, you should be like Moses. So it's not just that you should live as long as Moses, because we believe that people won't live longer any more than that. But you should have a quality of life as he had. Verse 8, Vayivku b'nei Yisrael et Moshe be'arvot Moav shloshim yom. The people of Israel mourned or cried over Moses for 30 days. Vayitmu yemei b'chi evel Moshe. And the days of mourning for Moses ended. And my sense there is that had to be ended. Like, why does it have to say they cried for 30 days and then the mourning stopped? They could have cried forever over Moses. But as we know, and I know we talk about it sometimes with families who are grieving, you have Shiva and then you've got to get up. And you have Shloshim and then we have to move forward. And grief is never going to go away. But we put one foot in front of the other, and what's that? We continue. We continue our life. We have a shloshim. We have a year. Judaism kind of moves us through in some way. I'm hoping that in the second half of our year, we'll talk a little bit more about ways that the text can speak to those experiences. days. In Hebrew, shloshim yom is a common way of saying days. The same way in Hebrew, shana, which would be singular year, is plural in biblical Hebrew. It says 120 shana, year. It doesn't say shanim, years. Yeah, that's
It's
a...
the same in modern Hebrew. It's when you have a definite number in front of certain words, a definite article.
Oh,
definite
thank
number,
you.
They do not change to the plural.
When you have when you have a number in front of a definite article,
Or number when it's
in front of the
certain
noun.
nouns do not become
Certain nouns.
plural.
Okay, I'm not enough of a grammar.
They're
Oh yeah, okay. So shloshim yom or esrim shana is grammatically sound.
an indefinite years,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
It's not shana.
It's shanim.
Same thing as day. They sat for days.
When you have years without it's indefinite, you say shanim. Thank you. So much good wisdom here. Verse 9. V'Yoshua bin Nun malei ruach chochma. Joshua was filled with that spirit of wisdom. Ki samach Moshe et yadav alav. Because remember, there was a laying of hands, which we already had witnessed in a previous scene. There was a laying of hands of Moses to Joshua, a transfer of that leadership. Vayishme'u elav b'nei Yisrael. It would be nice, actually, for Moshe to get the chance to write this down and to learn this, that the people listened to Yehoshua. Not only did he become the leader, but the effective leader. Vaya'asu ka'asher tziva Hashem et Moshe. I mean, it's important for the Torah to emphasize this, that after Moshe died, there was good continuity, and they continued to do as God commanded Moshe. And now we sort of zoom out. Verse 10, V'lo kam navi'od b'Yisrael k'Moshe. This really does read almost like a eulogy. There was never again a prophet in Israel like Moses. What was unique about Moses? Asher yida'o Hashem panim el panim. God knew him face to face. What could that mean? Face to face. Of course, God doesn't have a face.
He saw God, he went up to him.
He could see God directly. So what's interesting is there's a part of the narrative back in Shemot, after the moment at Sinai, and one of these conversations between God and Moshe, between Moshe and God, Moshe says, Har'eni na kvodecha. Moses says to God, show me your glory, show me yourself. And God says, what? God says, nobody can see me and live to tell the tale. So you cannot see my face, but you will see my back. Stay here in the cleft of the rock. I will, ani a'avir kol tuvi, I'm going to pass before you, and you will see my back, which is sometimes interpreted actually metaphorically. You can see hindsight, right? You can only understand God's presence maybe in hindsight, like, oh, now it makes sense. God had a plan or something like that. That's not the plain sense of the text, but what's important to note is that it can't be literal that Moshe saw God face to face. Just a second, I want to finish this concept. So it can't be that Moshe saw God directly, because we already heard God say, you can't see me directly. But rather, they could speak to one another readily. The Rashi is basically saying, Shehaya libo. He was familiar. They were familiar with one another. It wasn't that Moshe had to be in a trance, in a dream. That's how God came to Abraham, for example, right? In a vision. That's the word I was looking for. It was like you and me talking any moment. So face to face, meaning moment by moment, almost not casually, but instantly. Yes.
The difference with Moshe as a Navi, he was the only prophet that he was basically awake. All the other Nevi'im had in the Chazon, had it
Exactly.
when they were dreaming or some other kind of method.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was trying to say. So the other prophets had to have a dream or a vision, and Moshe could speak directly with God. So there was something unique about the communication that has never been replicated and will never. Lo kam b'Yisrael. Panim el panim.
It's dialogue.
And it's dialogue. Oh, very nice. It's two-way.
Because the other is just,
Well, other people talked to God. Think about the debate that Abraham has with God. Don't kill Sodom. Maybe there are more righteous people there. But all of that had to be in some kind of a trance. Yeah. It's one of the understandings of why Moshe. This also it's all midrash, but why Moshe left his wife, didn't live with his wife, and Miriam was upset and talked about him and rebuked him about that, because he had to be always in a pure state, always ready for prophecy at any moment. So he kind of became this man of God and isolated himself because of that. Okay, let's get to the end. Are you ready? V'lo kam navi. Oh, sorry, I just read that. Verse 11. Lechol ha'otot v'hamoftim asher shlacho Hashem la'asot be'eretz Mitzrayim. Also all the signs and wonders that God sent him to do in Egypt. Lepar'o u'lechol avadav u'lechol artzo. Pharaoh and his entire land. L'chol hayad ha'chazaka, l'chol ha'morah ha'gadol, the strong hand, the awesome power, asher asa Moshe le'enei kol Yisrael, before all the eyes of the people of Israel. That's emphasized again in his failed leadership. You didn't sanctify me before the people of Israel. But in the highest moments, he was that guy. He was the guy who brought God to the people, who made them see God directly in some way. They beheld God's miracles. And that's how the Torah ends with Le'enei Kol Yisrael, which is a national moment. Moshe in the context of our national story. So that's his eulogy, if you will. Another thing to note about the day that Moses died, the Talmud says he died on the same day that he was born. The 7th of Adar was his birthday and his yortzeit, which, according to our tradition, is something that points to him as a tzaddik. That a tzaddik lives in sort of a complete cycle. Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
Does anybody know someone who passed on their birthday?
My mother.
You, your mother-in-law, your aunt?
Yeah. In our family,
I mean-
March 15th is a day when several people died for some reason. I don't know.
So strange.
the
Beware the Ides of March. Yes, please, Esther.
Experienced a funeral this week, actually, where the person who died on the anniversary of their bar mitzvah.
Someone who died on the anniversary of their bar mitzvah. So not the birthday, but the day that they celebrated it. That's interesting. I don't know. I don't have anything particularly intelligent to say about that. But it's significant for sure.
I had an aunt and uncle who both died on the same day, not the same year.
Same
but their
date, aunt and
yahrzeit
uncle
is
who
the
had the same
day.
yortzeit. Wow. So I just want to, as we're reading about the death of Moses, just to give you a sense of the ambivalence that some of the midrashim have to this moment of Moses dying, and almost connected to the way that people couldn't believe that Aaron died. Remember that Moshe and Aharon and his son go up the mountain, and only Moshe and Aaron's son come back. And according to the midrash, the people say it's impossible. Aaron can't die. He's too powerful, and they have to be shown in a vision. God has to show them the picture of Aaron laying in his tomb. So there's just this sort of back and forth that when God finally, when Moses finally understood that as hard as he prayed now, there's a whole account, and we could do this whole text actually. It's incredible. Account of Moses davening, praying, and the sky blows up, and like all these things happen because of the power of Moses' prayer. But still, God says, "Sorry, too late." So finally, then he takes a scroll and he writes the name of God on it, almost as a protection, and then God says to the angel Gabriel go and bring me the soul of Moses. Bring me Nishmato Shel Moshe. You're going to be sent on this mission. And Gabriel says, this man who is equal to 600,000 people, I can't see him die. In other words, 600,000 is the number of male Israelites. That's the number of the nation. He's like the nation. I can't do it, God. We're not going to read the whole thing, but it's basically this back and forth. He goes and asks Michael, go bring me the soul of Moses. And he says, I was like his teacher, and he was like a student to me, and I can't see my student die. Each of these angels have such a connection to Moses. And finally, it's only the evil angel Samael who agrees to the task, and he encounters Moses sitting and writing God's name on a scroll, and a glow as strong as the sun is around Moses, and Samael is afraid. So I'm not going to go through everything. It's really a whole other page, but that even in the account of the passing of Moses, we have a sense of his holiness, and how much more important it is to show Moses was human. Even Moses' life came to an end. And even a leader like Moshe had to pass the torch. And so in reading of his passing, we learn a great lesson about leadership, about spiritual leadership, about not deifying, the rabbi, the leader, everyone. At the end of the day, he's not God. He is just human. And even the angels are intimidated by his spiritual power. But the Torah ends with Vayamat Moshe.
What's the significance of Moses' death being the end of the Torah?
What is the significance of Moses' death being the end of the Torah? Well, on a practical level, he received the Torah, and he dies with the Torah. Like, I'm going through my mind, like, what if the Torah had continued into getting into the land? But the Torah is inextricably connected to the revelation at Sinai by the hands of Moshe.
And also the fulfilling of the promise.
Yeah, but the promise isn't fulfilled until they get in with Joshua. I mean, the book of